opening, but it's utterly rare to get an hour with somebody from Trading Standards who just happily gives their time. So thank you for coming along. I don't know if you would like to introduce yourself, Michelle?
Yeah, I'm Michelle. I'm a Business Development Lead Officer at West Yorkshire Trading Standards, and that involves giving advice to businesses, mainly on regulation and what they need to do to comply with regulation as well. So it's start-up businesses as well as big established businesses, but it can be businesses of all sizes as well.
Perfect. So yeah, thank you so much for coming along this evening. I know myself, I've been in the business a long time, and it's invaluable having somebody who knows all the right answers when you're launching a product or a service into the community, into the world. So I'm going to ask you all to have a think of some questions while Michelle's chatting with us. Please drop them in the chat, or just put your hand up and we'll come to you. We really want this to be interactive, so you're kind of getting the advice that you need. We'll try and cover a lot of that with questions, and Michelle knows the sorts of things that you're going to need to know, so she'll probably just cover it quite organically anyway. So Michelle, do you want to tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing at Trading Standards, and maybe chat about why we need you?
Yeah. So we often get, as well as consumers that call for advice, we get businesses that call for advice or contact us by email. The consumers tend to be given advice by the Citizens Advice Helpline, and they take all the calls on behalf of all trading standards authorities for consumer advice. However, businesses will receive advice from their local trading standards. There's all types of advice when it comes to regulations, all types of businesses. So you've got your food businesses, all product safety related businesses, so they might be selling electrical goods, toys. There's just a wide range of products, as you can imagine, out there, and everybody who sells products or services to consumers, where the consumer is the end user, needs to be aware really of the regulations relating to that product or service that they're selling. So the types of advice that we give might be there's so many regulations, so what regulations apply to them depending on what types of products and services they're selling. We offer advice such as pay-as-you-go advice, where it's more bespoke and specific. Can I say that word? So, for example, somebody's setting up a new food business and they want to know what kind of labels they need to put on their products, their items. They're selling sandwiches, for example. There's quite strict regulations about allergens, for example. So they need to know what to put on there to make sure that they are complying with the legislation, and obviously that consumers are safe. So that's something that we can advise on. We also provide training as well to businesses. Again, we've got specific courses on food regulations. We've got specific courses on the Consumer Rights Act, which every business should be aware of, as well as things like weights and measures, which is more detailed about when you're weighing the products and the goods, if you're selling certain products, where that applies.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I know when you're a startup, you're spinning so many different plates just trying to get going. And I find, as a business advisor, and also with like a 30-year history in products, you tend to kind of like, well, I know I don't now because I know the rules, but in the early days, we skipped you. We skipped your stage. We went straight to a sell. We were like, oh yeah, we'll sort that out. But actually, it's so important, isn't it, to be aware of these regulations, because it can be quite disastrous, because your insurance is null and void if you haven't met them. Do you want to just chat a bit about why we need to follow these regulations?
Yeah, just to give you an example, well, in COVID, for example, we found on Facebook there was a lot of businesses popping up wanting to sell afternoon teas to be delivered. People are trying to find ways around things, or ways to make money, in certain circumstances. And again, they don't realise the consequences of doing something. So if they sold an afternoon tea and it had nuts in it, for example, I'm not aware of this actually happening, luckily, but that person could be prosecuted. So there was a case in North Yorkshire in the last couple of years where they had a cafe and they were prosecuted and unfortunately got charged with manslaughter. That's obviously a worst case scenario, but that was because they blatantly ignored the legislation about declaring allergens, as an example. There have been other businesses that again have been fined or taken to court again for not following legislation. At West Yorkshire, in the last few weeks, we've recently prosecuted a car business who was selling unsafe cars. Maybe they weren't aware that they have to comply with the Road Traffic Act, and they have to comply with other legislation about when they sell vehicles, they have to be safe. So there's all sorts of things like that go on in the background that, the public, although we do put things on our website, the public might not be aware of these actions that we're taking against businesses. And obviously it's sort of a last resort. So it's not something we do, straight away, but just as a sort of worst case scenario, if somebody's ignoring it, not necessarily not aware, but it's ideally we want to prevent that and get as many businesses aware of what they should be doing to comply with legislation before it gets to the point of any injury.
Yeah, and that is, isn't it? In a nutshell, it's about awareness.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I think what happens is a startup, and I don't know if any of you can agree with this. I know Ella's selling products. You get so excited by getting your product out there, and you get so excited by the sell that you kind of like, you don't forget, because the chances are you didn't know anyway. But
Yeah.
you push to one side the concept of the official things, the ticking boxes and turning, regulatory stuff in favour of nurturing your customers and your business. And I can see why, COVID afternoon teas, people got the skills, they're at home, they're thinking, I'm skint, that I've been laid off, or I'm furloughed, I need to make an extra buck, and they don't think that there's regulations out there.
Yeah.
But ultimately they're there to protect you and the consumer. Do you want to talk about that level of protection a little bit? Because I think in when I talk about it, if I ever get into a session, and we've got loads of clients at the university, and I'll say things like, I've thought about the regulations, you can just feel the energy of, are you serious?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to think about that. That's just going to be a cost. It's going to be time. It's going to slow me down.
Yeah.
And you feel like the big bad wolf going, but you don't understand.
Yeah.
You could, the consequences are so great.
Yeah, that's right. And it's totally understandable, but that sort of complying with trading standards enforced regulations is sort of lower on the list. You've got, if you're employing people, you've got tax, I can understand there's so many different rules, laws and things to follow, and safety legislation, product safety or consumer protection might be sort of lower on the list. But yeah, it is really important to make sure that you are protecting consumers as well as protecting your own business and yourself. And by doing that is to make sure that you are aware. The best website, in my opinion, to look at is Business Companion. So I would advise all businesses to go to businesscompanion.info. You can type in the box whatever, so say it's candles that you're thinking of making, because we had this quite a lot as well in lockdown. You can type candles and there's a whole page about the different legislation you need to be aware of with candles. So for example, there's fire safety legislation, CLP, if there's any chemicals, depending on what you're mixing in. So there's all sorts of things that businesses might not be aware of, and that website is the first place I would advise any startup business to go to, or even established businesses to go to have a look. There's in-depth guides which can be quite overwhelming, to be honest, but then there's sort of smaller guides to make a start to have a look at.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, the reason why you're here tonight is because ultimately you don't want to catch anybody out. You'd rather everybody was aware and was doing it, because that would make your life easier, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's right. And the certain products you might need to have tested. If you're manufacturing or making your own products, you might need to have those tested, or if you're having those manufactured outside of the UK, for example, you might not know the right things to ask from that manufacturer. So things like the test certificates that the product's been tested, is quite important, whether they've got a technical file, if it's something like an electrical product and a toy. I don't know. There's all sorts of products out there, and each product will have something that you need to be aware of. The overarching legislation is called the General Product Safety Regulations. So that's the overarching legislation for everybody to be aware of. And that basically says that anyone that's placing a product or service on the market should be placed, it should be a safe product. So that's sort of the basics. But then depending on what your product is, you start looking at product specific legislation.
Okay. So we've got only a few on tonight, which is kind of brilliant in a way, because it means that these guys are going to get serviced hugely. So what I'm thinking is, we've got a question already in from Kristen. I think what we can probably do is take everybody's business individually and look at what they might need to think about, and that way we'll probably cover quite a few bases. So we're going to start with Kristen. And she's put, I was just going to ask about what is an example of legislation for services such as marketing or creative agency?
Right.
So should we have a little chat about that?
Yeah, the legislation you need to be aware of for that would be the Consumer Protection from Unfair Trading Regulations 2008.
Oh, it's a mouthful, isn't it? Consumer
Protection from Unfair Trading Regulations 2008, as well as the Consumer Rights Act 2015.
Oh, you're gonna have to write that down, people. I can't write that fast. Okay, so those are the two that cover them.
Those are the two main pieces of legislation, and what they talk about. The Consumer Rights Act is for consumers. So if you are marketing a service, you have a website and you're marketing goods or services, it's the legislation sort of governs what you can say about how you describe your services, and also if you have terms and conditions, what terms are fair or not fair. So for example, if you are marketing a car, just for example, you've got a website and you're selling a car, or you sell cars, you're a car dealership, there's certain things that you should be careful about what you say. So if you're saying that it's got sat nav, it's got a 360 camera, it's got a sunroof, it's got this spec, that spec, you need to make sure that whatever you market, whatever you're saying, is what it is, actually what it is. So it's called due diligence. You need to make sure that you have done all your due diligence. So whatever you're saying on your website, whatever you're marketing, is correct. So if you use a marketing agency to do that, you should really make sure that that agency is what they're saying is true and correct to the best of their knowledge.
I think Kristen wants to drill down, so we're going to give Kristen her time. Kristen, do you want to take your mic off and drill down on this a little bit?
Hiya, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you.
That was very helpful. Thank you. But I have another question in addition to this. For example, I'm planning to hopefully have a creative agency, and I'm going to basically sell my service, which is photography, videography, and all of that, which doesn't kind of mean that I'm going to have a product. Does that same Consumer Right Act, was it from 2008? Do they all apply for the service again, or how does it kind of work? Because it's kind of all over.
So Consumer Rights Act covers both the sale of products and services. So there's different sections within the Consumer Rights Act that cover both. So services are still covered under the Consumer Rights Act, as is the Consumer Protection from Unfair Trading Regulations. But did you say that you were looking at being the marketing agency or providing the photography service?
I haven't decided on the details yet, but I'm planning on the main thing that I'm a photographer. The main thing that I'm going to give off to people is my photography, me going to events and everything. But I'm planning to have more than just that. I'm planning to have some kind of team with me probably, and build up brands, start a brand as well.
Yeah.
Which is again service, but service in a way of a product, which kind of makes sense because I'm giving off pictures and videos, I suppose.
Yeah. So if your end user will be a consumer, so for example, if you're going to be a photographer at a wedding, just as an example, and they're paying you to do that work, then you're providing a service to them. So whatever you advertise and market yourself as to what service you're providing needs to be sort of true and correct. otherwise, under the Consumer Rights Act, they could have a right to seek a remedy if they're not getting what has been advertised or marketed to them. So
Yep.
just
Makes sense, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're saying you get so many prints and this is the quality, then that's what you should be providing. And what we always advise to any business who's selling products, goods or services, is to make sure you have some form of written contract that a customer can sign, so that they're aware of exactly what it is that they're getting, how much it is, when they can expect to receive the product or service. And it covers you, so that you know that, you know, this is what's been agreed. Whereas if you have a verbal conversation and nothing's followed up in writing, it can be difficult to prove what was agreed after the event.
Or like an invoice, at least, of the job actually being done afterwards as well.
No, I think
suppose
she's talking about terms and conditions, Kristen. Listen, we've got a legal clinic you can come
that's
to.
before that.
Yeah, you can get yourself some terms and conditions drawn up with a solicitor. So
Yeah,
why
I have
I
that
don't
booked on.
Oh, perfect. There you go. So that's
Thank
what you
you.
need to talk about them with them.
Thank you.
No
Anything
problem.
else, Kristen? Any other questions?
No, that's all. That's all. Thank
Okay,
you.
we'll just have a think, and if anything else comes up, we can ask Michelle. Okay, Michelle. Well, that's really interesting. So, so the services and presumably products are also under the Consumer Rights Act as well.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Ella, do you want to? So Ella's got an interesting product, because what Ella does is she takes a product that's already kind of tested and manufactured, and like I say, a t-shirt, and then she prints onto the t-shirt. So she creates her own look with that t-shirt. So Ella, do you want to ask a little bit of question? Ask a few questions of Michelle? Is Ella there? Oh, there she is.
Yeah.
Cool.
So probably the only question that I'd have is, if I was like advertising my t-shirts, would I have to include the fact that, because I use Fruit of the Loom t-shirts, which obviously just from suppliers, would I have to include the fact that that's like what I use to print on, or do I just like market it as my own?
So you've got a separate contract there with Fruit of the Loom as such, you'd be classed as a manufacturer because you're using a product but then making it your own as a manufacturer or producer to then sell that on. So that's sort of a separate contract as such between you and Fruit of the Loom as to whether you can use their product for you to then sell on. So I don't know whether it's a difficult one, to be honest, because I don't know, it's sort of copyright or not copyright. It's their brand, Fruit of the Loom, so it's sort of to check with them whether you can use their product to sell it on, if you see what I mean.
Ella, do you leave the Fruit of the Loom tag in, or do you take that out and sew yours in?
Yeah.
Well, like I've been leaving it in. Sometimes they don't come with Fruit of the Loom, they just come with the sizing, so I leave that in, but like as I move forward, I'm planning on using my own tags, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay then. So Michelle, could you talk Ella through what would be best practice in terms of?
So best practice would be for you to have your own sort of brand tag on there. And the reason why is because for traceability, not that there should be an issue with it, with the product being a t-shirt. Obviously there's certain products that are classed as, you know, more riskier products, electrical products, toys for children are sort of riskier products than an item of clothing. But really it should be, if it's yourself that's sort of reprinting that or doing something with the t-shirt and selling it as your own, ideally best practice would be to you know, have your own label on there rather than using theirs, just because it's, I mean, I don't work much with trademarks, but there may be some kind of trademarks offence. Personally, we've got different officers at Trading Standards that specialise in different areas, and unfortunately trademarks isn't something that I work, so I can't fully answer the consequences of keeping a Fruit of the Loom trademark on a t-shirt and then redoing something with it and selling that on. But there may be something on Business Companion under trademarks that might give a bit more information on that and whether you can do that. But best practice would be, if there's no label, that won't be an issue. But if you can put your own labels in and then it's traced back to you.
So with those labels, she needs to give.
I'm gonna do.
She needs to have country of origin, company that's manufactured it presumably, and that's brought it in, because otherwise, because when you're manufacturing, you've got to have a country of origin, you've also got to have a trading address, don't you?
So yeah, so there's textile labeling regulations. So again, on Business Companion, there's quite a lot of information on the textile labeling regulations, and that's to do with. So you'll see in most clothing items, there's something about the how many degrees wash and whether it's cotton and what it's. So that all comes under textile labeling regulation. So it's worth. Again, Business Companion, I know, has definitely got some information on that.
Do you think you might do as a session on textile labelling regulations for the makerspace?
Yeah.
Over the next few months? That'd be cool, because I've obviously everybody in the makerspace is running textile businesses,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
that might be quite good. And Ella, you could come along to that.
Yeah, if I'm here.
Yeah, true. We're online though, usually, so you'll be fine. Any other questions, Ella?
Not right now. I'll put something in the chat if I think of it.
Perfect. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So I'm going to ask Cindy now if she's got any questions, because Cindy's got a very different business model. Although she's not trading at the moment, she plans to. And hers is like the gift market. So I don't know if Cindy, you want to ask any questions about what regulations you'd need to meet for your product.
Okay. I think I don't really know what kind of regulations I should be looking at, because I'm basically making my own product from scratch out of like materials that I'm buying. So I'm just not too sure how to look at it.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So you are actually the manufacturer. So that's maybe, Michelle, if you could explain to her a little bit about manufacturing and how that works.
Yeah, so there's different obligations depending on what you're classed as. So you could be classed as the manufacturer, which in your case you would be, or the retailer or distributor, for example. So distributor or importer. So you might be importing things from outside the UK, or you might be manufacturing it yourself. So again, on the general product safety regulations, I think would apply to you, and it defines the different types of operators. And under manufacturer, it'll list sort of what your obligations will be. The main one I would say is to make sure that you have documents that show everything that it is. So the materials, where are you purchasing those from? Have you got receipts for those? So I'd sort of compile some kind of file just so that you can show what it is, where you're getting your stock, your raw materials from. Any designs, you can keep that in. And this is just, I mean, it's things that you would have anyway, but it's just worth sort of putting that together in one sort of file, so that if there are any issues, which I'm sure there won't be, but you never know, if there are any issues, they could say, right, we've found a banned substance in this particular material, just an example, and you can say, well, this is where I purchased this from, this material.
Cindy, what materials do you use, Cindy?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
What materials do you use?
So now I'm working with PBT, which is a kind of plastic. It's what I use for my keycaps, and then I work polymer clay onto the plastic. Yeah.
So I don't know loads about materials, but I know things like phthalates, for example. There's restrictions of certain phthalates in plastics. There's things like that. So that comes under different legislation. But again, it's just to be aware that you purchasing raw materials in, that you keep a record of where from in case there are any issues with that material. And it's for you, it's for yourself really, just to keep records of everything that you sort of purchase, do, designs, your way of thinking, and it's called due diligence, just so that you've got any sort of record really, in case any training standards officer or anyone says, where did this come from, and this, just.
Yeah, and it's important for people to understand that when they're making something, they become the manufacturer.
Yeah.
When they put a series of things together, what happens then is they're responsible. And one of the biggest things I had to learn when I started manufacturing was there's a whole heap of regulations that, on top of the Consumer Rights Act regulations, that influence how I have to trade and what I have to do and how I have to communicate that trade. So yeah, okay. Any other questions for you, Cindy?
I did want to ask the question, so I'm definitely going to be like trading internationally and selling things to other countries, so like people in other countries. So would I also have to look at the policies in those countries that I'll be sending to?
Yes, you would. Just as an example for that, so there's a business that I've advised recently, obviously I can't say any names, but they manufacture products, and they were selling it into Ireland, and the Irish authorities, CCPC, I don't know what it stands for, but it's the Irish Authority, a Trading Standards equivalent, had contacted them to say that what they were selling in Ireland didn't comply with their standards. So it complied with the British standards and they could show that, but it didn't comply. They had slightly different standards. So that's the thing you need to be aware of if you're wanting to take your products to internationally to different countries. They each have their own, depending on what the product is, but a lot of them might have their own, especially now with Brexit. That's the difficulty. We might, when we were part of the European legislation, it was sort of aligned, but as we are in, you know, as we've Brexited, the legislation sort of changing in that Europe are going ahead with various other changes, and we're not following on with that. So we might diverge quite a bit more from the rest of Europe as well as international. So it is something you need to be aware of. This particular business that I was advising, unfortunately, had to withdraw their products from the Irish market and relabel that. I mean, there might be a workaround, so relabeling, for example, if it's a labelling issue, and then you can then continue to sell. But you do need to be aware really what the legislation is in that country, or what the standards are in the country that you're looking to sell.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else, Cindy?
No, nothing else for now. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So Cian's an interesting one. Cian, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes. So Cian produces music. So is there any regulations around his production of music and the sale of his music?
Is the sale of the music to other businesses rather than consumers, or is it?
Yeah, a lot of it is to like production publishers that will then try and get the music to editors.
Right, okay. So you're in a slightly different position in that you'd be B2B, so business to business contracts. The difference with that in selling your music to other businesses and not a sort of consumer who's purchasing it for their own use is that you can have terms and conditions, for example, in your business contract with them that might be classed as unfair if you had them with a consumer. So the main thing for you to be aware of is to make sure that whatever the contract is when you sell your music to the business that you're selling to, that you're happy with what you are putting in your terms and conditions about that sale, and that you're getting what you are wanting to get from that.
Right.
So
Thank you.
yeah, and instead of the Consumer Rights Act, you still have something called the Sale of Goods Act and the Supply of Goods and Services Act. So that was pre-2015, and the Sale of Goods Act was to cover the sale of goods, and the Supply of Goods and Services Act was to cover the supply of services. Those two acts are still in place, but only for business to business, whereas the Consumer Rights Act is for business selling products or services to consumers.
That's interesting. Cian, does that make sense?
Yeah, because I was a bit thinking because a lot of it sounded like it was just for selling businesses that were selling products. But I'll make sure I get the contracts and terms and conditions right. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Cian, you can do that with the legal clinic. So you can go along to the legal clinic and let them help. I think we've got, Nicola, have we got one left in June? I don't know if Nicola's there. Yeah, she is.
Yeah, we
Nicola?
have. I'll put the link in the chat now for everybody.
Yeah, that's good, because obviously that's a solicitor and you can get some terms and conditions that comply. So that's, and obviously Cian, use the business companion as well. I'm guessing the business companion talks about B2B regulations as well, does it?
Yeah, it's definitely worth having a look on there as well.
Okay, so Tinu, is it Tinu? Is that how I pronounce it?
Tinu.
Tinu, perfect. Have you got any questions for Michelle? Have you got a business? Or are you thinking of trading?
No, my startup is just yet to be completely grounded. It will be a service-oriented startup. For example, how we will provide sustainable solution for improving the sustainability of an open space or a building. So, is there any particular trading standard I should follow with?
Okay, probably need to drill down a little bit on what your service will be to be able to get advice. Maybe, Tinu, what we can do is if you go on the Business Companion and have a look on there and you've got any questions, Michelle might be kind enough to drill down on that when you've formed your idea a bit more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, perfect. So so we've got two new people. Hi Cami, hi Nabil. So Nabil is a graphic designer and sells his services, and Cami's an influencer. So if we start with Cami, because that's really interesting, because the influencer marketing kind of gig's really grown over the last 5 years, hasn't it? And obviously you think to yourself, oh well, how could there possibly trading standards be involved in influencer marketing? But I bet there are. I bet there is.
Yeah, again, with influencing, it's all about making sure that whatever you're selling or advertising on behalf of whoever, or whatever your claims are to the public, are correct and true to the best of your knowledge and that you're aware of.
Okay, so Cami starts to sell. So Cami starts, I mean, the aim of Cami's channel is to build it up and start to sell her services, you know, as like what's it called? Promotional, you know, when she's promoting a product. And I always say that you've got to put ad on it, don't you? You've got to kind of like, what's all that about?
Yeah, so that doesn't come under trading standards legislation, that bit. So I'm not fully aware of that, but there is something that's, it might be enforced by a different body, but yeah, there is something where you do have to say that it's an ad if it's an ad. So there was a lot of influencers that were, whereas an ad and they were being paid for it, but they weren't making the public aware of that. And you know, I'm using this cream and it's amazing. So I don't know if it's the CMA, Competition Markets Authority, or ASA, Advertising Standards Authority, but both those two bodies look at competition in the and fair marketing to consumers and the public. If you go on the ASA, Advertising Standards Authority website, you can look at case studies there to see what decisions have been made. I was actually on there the other day for one of my businesses who was wanting to make a claim on their website where they were comparing themselves to a competitor and saying that they were a lot cheaper. You've got to be really careful about the claims that you make. So you have to be able to back up any claims that you make. So if you're wanting to compare yourself to another business, say we're 20% cheaper than, you know, A, B, and C company, you need proof that you are. You can't just sort of make these claims and not be able to back them up as the honest truth. And that's where the Advertising Standards Authority, for example, comes along, because they would look at claims that are made online on websites, as well as claims that are on TV, for example, or radio advertising. And they've got a code of practice that any business who is looking to advertise and make claims on their advertisements should follow.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So is there anything Cami needs to be aware of in terms of beyond the Advertising Standards Authority in terms of trading standards? So if she was to sort of like sign a contract with somebody and agree to do X, Y, and Z, is there anything she needs to be aware of? Because I'm guessing that'll be like, is that a B2B because she's a business to business? So is she under the same regulations as Kane is?
That's right, yeah. So it's the same advice to me. And again, that not workshop, but that drop-in Eventbrite that you've got, I think sounds really useful for a lot of people on this workshop, because terms and conditions are so important, and that's for anybody, whether you're selling to businesses or consumers, whether you're selling products or services. It applies to anybody who's selling a product or service. That they need to make sure they have the right terms and conditions that suit them, as well as being fair to the customer as well. So getting the terms and conditions right straight away is the quite a big part of what you should be doing when you're starting up a business and beginning to sell to somebody.
So I guess then so if we stay on the business to business, because Nabil and Andy have just come on. Now it's good, actually, good timing, Andy, bravo, because Nabil and Andy have got very similar businesses. They're graphic designers, and both of them, am I right in thinking both of you are doing business to business work? Do you want to take your mics off, both of you, Andy and Nabil?
What do you mean by that? What's the difference between business to business and like business to customer?
So if this is a consumer, so like business to business is where you're doing a trade with another business. So you're doing logo creation. So that tends to be somebody else's trading. So business, another business, you're selling your service into another business, whereas consumer is directly to a person, an individual who's hired your services. So that could be, hey Andy, would you create a birthday card for my daughter? Versus, hey Andy, would you create a logo and a style guide for my business?
Yeah, it's a business to business then.
Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about that a bit more from the perspective of the graphic design side of things? Because I think they missed it earlier with Kian.
What would you like me to talk about, sorry?
No, Michelle. I'm just saying Michelle, so you two can hear what she said to Kian about the business to business regulations.
Yeah. So if you're trading with another business, you can have terms and conditions which could be different to if you are trading directly with the consumer. And what that means is if you're trading with consumers, you've got to have sort of more fair and open and honest terms and conditions. Whereas if you're trading with the businesses, it's expected that that business is more astute, more aware, and you can have terms and conditions that you wouldn't normally be able to have if you were selling to a consumer that might be unfair if you were selling to a consumer. Just to give you an example, a while ago, there was a lot of gym memberships where they were on a rolling 12-month contract and they'd take payment after 12 months. They won't give you notice. It'd just be a rolling contract. The CMA did a big part of research into that and decided that that was unfair on consumers who might forget that they're in this rolling contract and they should be allowed to cancel or able to cancel. Now, that's for consumers. If you have a trade-to-trade contract, you might actually be allowed to have a contract that might be longer, a longer term, and might be a rolling one. And it depends what you've sort of signed and agreed. So that's why it's so important that your terms and conditions cover exactly what it is that you're wanting to cover as part of your contract and your agreement.
Yeah, so that's back to the Nabil and Andy. We've got one more legal clinic left in June before we finish, and I'm sure we can extend it if we ask him because he's pretty decent, his Boniface. If you want to come along and just check your terms and conditions and make sure they're kind of up to scratch. One of the things you might have missed if you check through the chat is there's something called the Business Companion, and the Business Companion is there for you to use to work out any regulations that exist for whatever service or product that's on the market. So it could be that you could go on there and have a look at the regulations as well, Nabil and Andy.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Have you got any questions, like specific questions, both of you?
One thing I've noticed, like with one of my clients, is that so I have terms and conditions, but they also had terms and conditions. So it's like when I read their terms and conditions with some of like mine, some of it did like clash and it was similar, but some of it was different. And I know that obviously you can say that you don't want to sign like terms and conditions depending on, but how do you like kind of avoid that? So it's like, because what ended up happening was they signed mine and obviously I signed it, and then I signed theirs and they signed it as well. So it's like there's two contracts that have been signed when really it would probably be better if one contract was signed, because then if there's any issues in the future, it's not like one contract says this and the other one says that.
I feel like this.
I was just going to say, who's the one that's selling the product service, you or them? Who's receiving the money for whatever it is that you...
I was providing my services and they would pay me for my services.
So it should be your terms and conditions. It's the person who's selling, not theirs. So it's you're providing the service. They either accept your terms and conditions or they can ask you to vary those. And if you agree, then you would amend your own terms and conditions for that particular client. You don't have to do it for all your clients, but maybe you might agree for that particular client to have different terms and conditions that they sign. But it's you as the business that's providing and selling your service or product that should be setting the terms and conditions.
Agreed. You shouldn't really ever have two sets of terms and conditions in an agreement. That kind of just they cancel each other out, sadly. So it just gets messy. But we can do that, Andy, with you. That's something we can help you with. And I mean, you can take it to an advisor, or you can come and see me, or we can do it through legal clinic, but we can definitely help you with that, Andy.
Okay, no problem.
Sometimes it's about confidence, isn't it, Michelle, as a start on business? Like you start, and we were talking at the beginning, Andy, about how we kind of like, we juggle, so we spin so many plates and we forget there's like, we need terms and conditions and we need trading standards and we need all these things in place. And then we're kind of then suddenly faced with a problem. And usually, I mean, look, I'm hands up, I'm 30 years doing this. So I've only learned by having zillions of problems. You know, somebody threatens to sue me, this doesn't work, this, you know, and then you learn along the way. And one of the reasons why we wanted to bring you in and we want to work so closely with West Yorkshire Trading Standards is because we don't want our students and our alumni to do what we did. Like do as I say, not as I do, right? We want want them to plan ahead, we want them to think about all the things that they need to do so that when they trade, it's seamless.
Yeah, and protect yourselves as well, because when you're starting out, there is so much to try and figure out and learn. So the more aware you are and the more knowledge you have to begin with, the more protected you are against any claims or issues or problems.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Just to quick recap from the beginning, it's like these regulations are there to protect consumers, but they're also there to protect you. And I think on some levels, if we follow it, they're there to protect us more, because then we know we know we're serving them properly. We know that we can sleep at night. We're not going to get sued. Our insurance isn't nil and void. We can trade with peace of mind. When I learned about trading standards and all the regulations, it's like, wow, what a weight lifted off your shoulders when you know you're meeting those standards.
Yeah, it is, and it's about having a level playing field as well. Because you might have some businesses that totally ignore regular. They might be aware and they might think, no, it costs too much to test that. I'm just going to make it and send it out. I'm not going to bother testing that product. And
that is
for those that for those that blatantly ignore it, there does need to be some sort of consequence. But obviously, we want to make sure everybody's aware so that they then have the choice to hopefully comply with that legislation and not put themselves in a position where they could, you know, find themselves in a bit of bother with trading standards or any other authorities that might take action. Just to give you an example as well, we had well, one of the businesses I advise, as an example, is Mamas and Papas. And a few years back, they had an issue with they had little booties and had little pom-poms on them. And they started to receive some complaints about pom-poms coming loose and babies able, you know, and it's a choking hazard. So it's quite a big deal. They did a massive recall, put it, you know, contacted every customer they could, put it on their website, did everything they could to recall those. Luckily, nobody got hurt. But there's a standard under the toy safety regulations, there's legislation, and there's a standard about the tension of affixing a pom-pom to a booty or a product, an item of clothing, and how you need to test it to make sure that it's a Newton strength. I mean, it's quite but it has to be able to stay on. And it was failing that test. I think they'd got a pass certificate because they do the testing, but it turned out that a certain batch, they'd changed something in the manufacturing process and it wasn't working. So that's another thing. If you're making products or services, you need to make sure that, if possible, depending on what it is you're selling, that you put batch numbers and you can trace what it is. Now that's not really for services, that's for products if you decide to sell products, because manufacturing processes can change, especially if you are having them manufactured abroad, say in India, and they change their process and you're not aware of that, and then something could become an issue, like a detachable from especially if it's like a children's clothing, something like that. So you get
that's so important, because I've manufactured abroad and we had to do that for total traceability, because you know you only need somebody new to come into the manufacturing process and change them ever so slightly, or change the tension on the stitching, and next thing you know it's coming loose, and then the stuffing's out, and so I totally get that. So we've had somebody else come on. Oh, Andy's just writing something. We'll hang on for Andy so she can. But we've had somebody else come on, Emily, and Emily's business is textiles. So it would be great to do a recap on the textiles labelling for her. She has got, and Emily, just so you know, what we've done is we've gone around everybody on the screen today and given them a bit of time with their business so you can ask questions. So Emily's got a suit that she's just created a sample for. So she's just at that stage where she's trying to work out. She's probably going to do a really small batch run. You know, maybe it's half a dozen of a piece or something, or might even do made to order. What sort of under the textiles labelling, what does she need to think about in terms of regulations?
So I think, like I said, there's over 250 regulations we enforce. So I don't know everything about each one of them, and I sort of, on a case by case basis, would advise. But from memory, textile labelling, there will be certain information that you have to put on the label. So it might be the washing instructions, the makeup of the product, so that what the textiles actually are, the percentage of that. So it might be 80% cotton, 20% polyester, whatever it is, it's likely you'll need to put that on the label. But that will be laid out in those textile labelling regulations, and the business companion.info website will be able to give you that information as well. And then the legislation itself, there'll be a link from Business Companion to the legislation itself if you want to go even deeper into those regulations.
Okay, so Emily, do you have got any questions? Emily's got this divine handmade cloth from Scotland, and that's part of her concept. Is she sourced it, this hand woven cloth? Emily, do you want to take your mic off and chat a little bit with Michelle?
Hi. So it was just today, I came across a business that put a tag in their garment, and you can trace it back to the sheep that it came from and its name and where it lived and all sorts. I'm assuming that's not like anything to do with
No,
that
that's
won't
really
be a rule,
good.
will it? But how good is
Yeah,
that?
that'll be
Good.
over and above. That'll be
Yeah,
over
yeah.
and above the legislation.
Completed
Um,
trading standards.
Yeah, yeah, you wouldn't have to do that. In food products, which is different to different legislation, food legislation, but there's origin in there. So if you say British beef, you have to sort of trace it back to, and that's to do with, don't you remember years ago, you might not, horse meat scandal, where it was found there was some horse meat in some beef that was being sold in some of the major supermarkets. And again, that's to do with traceability, you know, that you need to be able to trace where things have come from, especially food products. But yeah, that sounds like they're going sort of over and above what they
Yeah, but I
should
like
do.
it. I mean, let's do
Yeah.
it, right? That's such a good
I know it is
USP.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah,
absolutely quality.
As well, I don't know whether this is kind of relevant to this this call, but I was wondering about. I had a look on Instagram because I've called my brand Aldred Clothing, and I had a look to put my name as that on Instagram, and somebody's already got that name. Is
Okay.
that like a problem? Am I gonna?
That's a legal thing, Emily, and we can do that because that's
I did
down
think
to,
it would be a
yeah,
bit
we'll
irrelevant,
do
but-
that tomorrow. We'll have a chat about that tomorrow. I can help you with that. It's not an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Are you selling to consumers, Emily, as well, your clothing?
Yeah.
So just to make you aware, so if, for example, you've got a website and you're selling your clothing to consumers, if it's bespoke for a specific consumer, you don't need to give them a cancellation right. So I don't know. So this is a different bit of legislation, which we call the ICAC regulations, ICAC.
What, sorry?
The ICAC in short, it's got a really, really long title, but it's basically the cancellation rights that consumers have, which is 14 days starting the day after they receive the goods. So if you were to buy an item online from River Island and you receive it, you have 14 days to return that. If you don't like it, for example, we're not talking about faulty goods, we're just talking about the fact that you've ordered it online from a website and you've not seen that item until it's arrived. However, there are exemptions to those 14 days, and that would be if it's a bespoke item, so it's made specifically for somebody. So if you're making bespoke items specifically to their measurements, then you don't need to, they don't have that cancellation right. So again, talk about terms and conditions a lot, but you need to make sure that in your terms and conditions you do state that bespoke items can't be returned, for example, and that clinic will be able to advise on how to word that. There's certain wording that you can use in your terms and conditions, but that's worth being aware of, because if it's not bespoke and you're selling goods online, potentially you might get consumers sending them back. And there's more on that as well on Business Companion, because the cost of return, so long as you put it in your terms and conditions that the consumer is liable to pay the cost of return, then you can stick to that. If you don't mention that, then you are liable as the business. So it's quite important to know what the legislation says so that you can, again, protect yourself and make sure that you're putting your right information on your website about returns, for example, or cancellation.
No, that's so important, because that's one of the things I was in my early days of my businesses. I was we used to, that's how I built my business up online. And oh my Lord, it's amazing how much consumers know their rights.
Yeah.
And if you've kind of just overlooked something, so you have to be super diagnostic and precise on your terms, so that you can't get called out on things and you don't get yourself in a tiz. So but again, Emily, we can do that with you as a team. We can look at that and we can go through the legal clinic for that. Just to say, everybody, I know I'm like a broken record. However, it's the last legal clinic in June before we finish for summer, and we're not back till September. So if you've got anything you need to look at, you need to come along to that and book in. And obviously, those sessions are going to go fast. So Nicola's going to have to probably fight people off for that one. Okay, so have anybody got any more questions? Any more questions for Michelle this evening? Anything? Okay, so Michelle, will you come back?
Yes.
I feel like it's funny, because I knew when we were doing this 1 hour, I was thinking 1 hour to cover manufacturing services. You know, it's like it's just a lot to cover. So maybe what we can do is get you back on our podcast series, which we're launching in September, and we can do the textile, hopefully the textile regulations, maybe in the makerspace.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And
sorry,
go on,
can I just interrupt? Would you be able to put? Sorry, I know you said a website that had all a list of the standards. Could you just put that in the chat, please?
Yeah, don't worry, I've got it for you.
It's
called the Business Companion, Emily, but the team are aware of it because we recommend it. So don't worry, it's just popped it in there now.
Yeah, we recommend it to all businesses, big, small, whoever. It's just a really, really good website, and it's always kept up to date as well with the latest information and regulations.
So if you've got any more questions, if you go to Nicola or myself, would you be kind enough to answer them if they've missed anything? Because it's really hard when you're on the spot, isn't it, to think of everything, and then you know, as God made little apples, you're going to switch off and go, oh, I wish I'd asked this. So would you be okay to do that for us, Michelle?
Yes, of course, no problem.
Perfect. Oh, Cammie's writing. So she could be writing thank you and goodbye, but she could be writing a question. So let's just hang fire before we say goodbye. Yeah. We don't want to like have a burning question, not be able to sleep tonight because she never got to ask it. We're waiting, Cammie. Oh, she's stuck. Oh, thanks. There you go. Thanks a lot. Okay, thank you so much for your time, Michelle. It's been an absolute pleasure. I know all these guys will have benefited massively from hearing all that advice. Like I said, I wish I'd known it 30 years ago, so I wouldn't have hit so many minds along the way and blown myself up. But there's
just so much to learn, isn't there? So it is understandable that, you know, you're not going to be able to take everything in all at once, and it's bit by bit as you go along, you know.
Build it up slowly but surely. But the most important thing, everybody, is to go check that site, to go check what standards you need to meet to communicate effectively and efficiently and precisely on your website or any marketing that you're putting out. Don't claim to be anything that you're not, because you can get called out in it. Anything else, summary? Anything else I've missed?
I think you covered the main points there, just to and terms and conditions. Keep talking about that, but to cover yourself. Yeah, and that legal clinic sounds really useful for help with that, definitely.
We do try. If you want to set up a trading standards one with us every quarter, we can accommodate you.
Good idea.
Come forth and visit. We've got we work with a lot of outside businesses now as well. So, you know, in the makerspace, you could come and do it in the makerspace. Yeah. If you wanted to. If you wanted to just have a couple of hours once every few months in there.
Yeah. That sounds really good.
Oh, we'll hold you to that, Nicola. Quick, get onto it. Right. Well, thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you, everybody, for coming along this evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Lots of thanks and praise there. So
thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Take care now. Bye, Michelle.
Bye. Bye.